So today we are doing, I guess, one of the episodes I've kind of been looking forward to the most for the off season, and that is kind of our program power rankings. And this is not specific to the 2022 season or the season we just saw. I would view this as being a mixture of success in the recent past and future outlook for the near future. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, I mean, and this is how like we both ranked our programs, and then we did like a composite of our rankings.
Yeah.
And for me anyway, like my criteria when ranking these programs is pretty much what's the likelihood of them winning a title in the next 5 years,
Okay.
or at least being a playoff contender. I think you can say that, yeah, for sure, a lot
Yeah.
of these teams won't be winning titles in the next five, but like where are they on the contender rankings? Like what's their ranking as a contender to go to the playoff and then win a playoff game and go to the championship?
How healthy are these programs right now, basically, is kind of the way I was looking at it a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, I guess before we jump into the list, what are some of the different criteria you used? Was it just a feel thing, or did you actually look at some different data and stuff?
I mean, so most of these programs is pretty easy, and in fact, at the top, like we agreed on all of the top four programs. Like our lists are the same for
Yes.
the top four, and that's kind of easy. Like I think it was pretty outlined. That was a feel thing. Like that was
Sure.
pretty much a feel thing. A&M, we had A&M up pretty high, and with that, you're kind of going on recruiting rankings.
Mhm.
Because there's not like they went 8-4, like so it's not like there's they not like they have a win loss record that can back up that that high ranking. But I think recruiting has probably the most to do with it. Recruiting combined with how confident you are in their coaching staff,
Yeah.
I think is kind of where like it's a balance in between the two, and for both of us we'll probably have slightly different balances, but I think it is
Mhm.
mostly a feel thing because yeah, it's really hard to put a hard number on these programs. Like as a
Sure.
program overall, it's hard to get it down to just one number. So it's a combination of recruiting combined with like confidence and coaching staff.
Yeah, kind of the areas I looked at. I looked at the 2021 team talent rankings on
Okay.
24/7. I looked at the
Hmm.
recruiting class they just signed. I actually ranked the coaches.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I didn't spend a lot of time, but I was just curious how this would all play out. I also
Yep.
kind of looked at how much money these programs spend slash are willing to spend. Just and part of that, I guess, is because I don't know. Maybe I ended up a little higher on some Power Five and a little lower on some Group of Five teams than I
Yeah.
should have.
Sure.
Yeah, I do think that affects the ceiling. How much money you can spend. And I looked at tradition, which basically was just how successful have they been historically,
Right.
and history kind of repeats itself. So
Sure.
that's whatever. And then like I used those as a tool. I did. It's not like I averaged those out and said, okay, how does it come out? I kind of looked at those as different tools, and that's how I sort of came up with my list.
Gotcha.
So, by the way, yeah, you mentioned we have the exact same top four in the same
Yep.
order. We
Right.
also have the same teams from 6 to 10, just
Yes.
scrambled.
Yep.
And then 11 to 16, we have only one difference.
Okay.
And then from 17 on, it was just kind of
Crapshoot.
what's your
Yeah. Yeah.
preference,
Yeah.
basically.
Sure.
Once you get past 16, yeah, there was just, it all depends on what you're looking for, because it's very subjective at that point. This whole thing is very subjective.
It is.
But yeah, let's dive into it. Number one, we agreed Alabama. Um, yeah.
Shocker.
Okay. So we have Alabama 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, and Clemson 4.
Yep.
How much time did you spend thinking this through? Was this pretty easy for you, or is it close?
Yes, I don't think it's close. Alabama's the runaway favorite at one. This
Yeah.
like there's no discussion, and there is no close second place. Georgia is second place, just yeah, fresh off a title and has recruited incredibly well for the last 5 years. Georgia, like I feel comfortable putting them at two. Ohio State for me with Ohio State at three. Okay, and Ohio State Clemson, like that was kind of the debate for me at 3 and 4, and I went with Ohio State 3, Clemson 4. and that would have been drastically different last year, I think,
Hmm.
even though Ohio State beat Clemson last year, just because of how much I trusted Dabo. But I think for me, Dabo lost some I lost confidence in him a little bit this year. And so I have more trust in Ohio State. Ohio State's recruiting better. Ohio State has right now the better starting quarterback. I
Yeah.
went with Ohio State. Like that was kind of for me, like I could see Ohio State easily making the playoff this year. Clemson could. I think it's probably less likely. So yeah, for me, that's kind of like when it came down to like where my feel was, it was pretty much like when's the last time you made a playoff and like
Hmm.
how'd you do in that playoff. So I think that was like pretty much like my tiebreaker.
Yeah, I think I probably spent more time debating Ohio State with Georgia at number 2 than I
Okay.
did debating them with Clemson at 4.
Okay.
I feel I felt pretty comfortable with Clemson at 4 just because, like, if you're talking about recent success as well as future outlook, like you can argue that some other schools might have a slightly rosier future outlook than Clemson, but they don't have the recent success. They don't have the track record.
Right.
So to
Right.
me, there was a Clemson is almost in their own tier. Like that's not quite fair. Like yeah, they're still a top tier program. Very. I mean, I would probably argue like that top 4 kind of goes together. But I did feel like Ohio State was a little closer to 2 than they were to 4. Ohio State, Georgia.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of debate at 1. I mean, we all trust Nick Saban, the greatest coach of all time in Alabama.
Right.
Like they're going to do
Right.
their thing. The
Right.
Georgia Ohio State one is very interesting because like these two
Okay.
programs actually recruit against each other quite a lot. Like you do
They
see a
do.
lot of
Yeah.
programs with both of these schools on their final lists. How would you differentiate Georgia and Ohio State if you're comparing them as just programs right now?
So Georgia has recruited slightly better. They've both recruited at an incredible level. Georgia maybe slightly better. So I gave them a slight edge, probably more based on geography than anything
Hmm.
else. And then also like recency bias. Like they just came off a championship, like less than 2 months ago. So it's hard to go. It was hard for me to like justify putting them at 3 and Ohio State at 2, and Ohio State hasn't like they have not Ohio State hasn't performed well when they've played teams like Alabama or well they did beat Clemson last year, but like they've lost against like these physical teams and
Hmm.
and I like yeah, I don't know. I think it was probably maybe the lack of physicality when I saw them play Oregon this year, when I saw Ohio State play Michigan, even the Utah game in the Rose Bowl, like
Yeah,
they could have had Cam Rising not gone down, like Utah probably wins that game. And it it was tough for me to justify putting Ohio State above a Georgia team that blew out Michigan, Like
sure.
that was tough for me to get over. And I understand we're trying to project forward, but like all we really have is what we've seen, this past year. And like
Yep.
this has been that was last year was one of Ohio State's worst years in a while. Like that
Hmm.
was not a very good year for them. So that's why for me Georgia was a clear step ahead of Ohio State, and that's why Ohio State was maybe more competing with Clemson for the 4 spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So number 5, we have a pretty big drop off after 4, just in our average rankings because 6 to 10. Again, we have the same teams, but they're all scrambled.
Right.
Actually, 5 to 10. I'm sorry. Texas A&M we have at number 5.
Hmm.
You ranked them 7th.
I did.
How big? Do you disagree with me on this 5 to 10 thing? Like, do you think they're all close, or did you see some serious gaps here? Like, what do you think about this A&M ranking at 5?
Yeah. Okay. So it goes Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson. Large drop off for me.
Oh.
Large drop off. This is very
Yeah,
much the second tier,
yeah,
and it goes to 10. Like 5 to 10 is its own. That's just tier 2 pretty much.
yep.
And yeah, like we had the same schools 5 to 10. We had them ranked differently. Okay, I I understand that A&M just signed the greatest class in the history. Like we've talked about it. I understand they went 8-4 last year.
Yep.
Like I want to see it. I want to see it a little bit more before I had other programs ahead of them. I had Oklahoma ahead of them and I had LSU ahead of them simply because I think those programs will be more solid going forward. I think A&M is very volatile, and I think if A&M goes 8-4 next year, a lot of those players that just came in will be leaving. Some of them are going to leave anyway, but I think a lot of them will be exiting because I think they're pretty much in win now mode, and I don't think they're gonna win now. Like if that makes sense. So
Sure.
I mean they could go 10-2. Like they could even probably 9-3 is probably more their range. But like, does that make them top 5? For me, it doesn't. So
Yeah.
I had them a little lower. I know we overall as a pod, but our average was we had them at 5. But for me, they were a little lower than that.
Sure. I really didn't want to put anybody at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was hard for me to actually pick a team because
Okay.
at this point, like, yeah, you're kind of projecting. Like I feel like with the top 4, we have both tremendous recent success and
Yep.
a, I mean, generally speaking, a really good outlook in the future. And after 4, yeah, A&M does not have the tremendous recent success.
Okay, so we have the identical top 4 that we talked about.
Yeah.
However, one of the that's not going to be the playoff next year. The odds are very much against that being the playoff next year. So one of these teams, probably one of the 5 through 10 teams, is going to end up making the playoff. It's going to be one of those. And who do you think is most likely to make the playoff next year out of that next batch? And for me, it's just really hard to say A&M.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I think for me, I was probably basing my ranking. I did rank A&M at 5. I was mostly putting it based on just like it's not just the recruiting class they signed because they have been recruiting at a top 6 level for several years now.
Yeah. Okay.
And so like I do think that they have a fairly high floor.
Okay.
I don't know that they're ever going like maybe they have a tendency to go 8-4 maybe when they shouldn't. Like just look at this last season.
Yep.
But I do think like that's about as bad as it can possibly be with that level of talent on that roster.
Yeah.
And we did just see a top 5 finish from them like 1 year ago. So like I do think that's probably as likely to happen for them going forward as anybody else in this 5 to 10 range, just because of the clear talent. And we have seen Jimbo win a title before. How much credit you want to give to him for that? I don't know. Whatever. And it's been a while. Like we're looking at 8 years ago now. So I'm not predicting A&M to win a title or anything, but yeah, this 5 to 10 range, I feel like all of these programs have high ceilings, and none of them are quite. You could argue that all of them are. There's a fairly decent gap between their ceiling and where they are right now.
Sure. I do think it's interesting that of these, like we viewed these teams as like flawed. Like we kind of view these teams as a clear step down, but like one of these teams is going to make the playoff next year. Like I'll put money on it that one of these teams is going to make the playoff next year. And that's like, that's kind of, I think the crazy nature like of this, because we view these teams as like clearly a step behind this offseason. But yeah, even like even with a few transfers yet, like these teams could look drastically different. But it's really hard to predict. That said, hey, I'm not backing off though. Like I'm not giving myself an out. I'm just saying that I wish I had put Oklahoma ahead of LSU.
Sure.
It's pretty much. I ranked Oklahoma at 6, right behind A&M, and I wish I had put I had LSU 5, Oklahoma 6, and I wish I had put Oklahoma at 5 because like I'm beginning to feel kind of confident in Oklahoma. Like a little bit, sneaky confidence in Oklahoma.
Well, they are our next team. You ranked them at 6, and that's where they end up in our total rankings. I had them at 7, just a bit behind. But again, I have no issue with them at 6. There's a part of me that feels like the Brent Venables hire could really work out. Just, mean, especially if you look, Jeff Lebby, the offensive coordinator hire there. Yeah, that's if you hire a defensive-minded head coach, obviously the first thing you want to look at is what does he hire for his offensive coordinator, and I don't know that he could have done any better than what he just did.
No, I completely agree, and I think their ability to keep the class together and still finish with a top 8 class, like Oklahoma did, losing Lincoln Riley and still finishing top 8 is massive. Like we have to figure out like what they're going to do at quarterback. Like it'll probably be Dylan Gabriel, but like maybe not. So. Yeah, we have yet to see, but I am people are unsure about Oklahoma. I will currently be putting quite a bit more confidence in them as like I'm getting good vibes. I'm getting really good vibes from Oklahoma right now and feel good about them at 6. In fact, probably wish I had moved them up to 5.
by the way, just historically, like if you look at the last 100 years of college football, you could argue Oklahoma has the highest floor in the country over the last 100 years. Like
Absolutely.
they may
Yeah.
they may not have long stretches where they're the best team in the country, but they are never bad. Like Oklahoma is just always a good program. Like
Sure.
you just feel very confident in their ability to be a top 10 school. Okay, number 7, we have LSU. You mentioned you had them at 5. I have them at 10. They were
Yep.
last in my top 10. So this is I think our biggest difference in the top 10 here. You just mentioned you wish you would put Oklahoma ahead of them.
Yep.
Tell me what you like about LSU. What made you put them at 5 originally? What? Yeah.
Okay. So Ed Orgeron won a title there, right?
Yes.
Les Miles won a title there.
Yes.
I think that Brian Kelly is a far superior coach to each of those.
Yeah. Agree.
Far superior. So, like, I believe we're grading the program as a whole.
Sure.
Like, I have tremendous confidence that LSU will go to the playoff in the next 5 years. Like,
Okay.
I believe that, like, absolutely, just lock it in. That's a slam dunk. More so, I think probably probably more so than A&M. Okay, sorry, not going to back off. Not backing off of it. I believe that LSU will go to the playoff before Texas A&M will. I believe that. I think the talent there, the program there in Baton Rouge is incredible. I think, yeah, I believe in Kelly a lot. Now, I understand that I did not like him at Notre Dame. I didn't. I'm with you. I didn't like him at Notre Dame, and we can get into this more. But, like, I believe that he will do a better job at LSU than he did at Notre Dame. I think that.
Okay.
I'm done. Yep.
Basically the reason I had them at the bottom of the top 10 is just because other than USC, I think they have the worst roster right now of the top 10 schools. Probably
Okay.
I do think it's the longest uphill battle. There's talent there,
Yeah.
but I don't know that it's quite to the level that we would think LSU would have. Just because they've lost quite a few guys in the portal, and a lot, the 2019 team is gone. Like, that's done. That's over with.
Right.
And like I mentioned, I think they probably have a better roster right now than USC. I don't know that that's even arguable, but I do think that if I'm looking at future outlook, I just trust Lincoln Riley to recruit a lot better than Brian Kelly over the next 5 years. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Brian Kelly, our biggest gripe about him as Notre Dame fans was just constantly that the recruiting was about 85% of what it should have been. Like, it was good. It was really good. It just wasn't quite to where it should have been. And I don't know that that's necessarily going to change at LSU. He'll bring in better classes just by virtue of being at LSU. It's easier. But
Yeah.
you're still – he's recruiting against Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher and Kirby Smart for every recruit now. And A&M and LSU are actually fairly big rivals, and I think I just trust A&M to recruit a little better over the next 5 years than I do LSU.
Okay, that's fair. No, I think they will recruit better. I think they will get coached in circles on Saturdays, though.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I have faith in Kelly, like, far above Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher got lucky with Jameis Winston and won himself a fluky national championship and will never do that again. He will never do that again. He could go to the playoff, but he will never do that again. So, yeah, like, again, if Coach O and Les Miles can win titles at LSU, Brian Kelly can win multiple. He can win multiple there, and even if he recruits at an 85% level, that's enough to win him a championship. It really is. Like Coach O never had terrific recruiting classes. Like, they were good, they were really good, but they were never like they never had like a Texas A&M class from this year where it's just like, whoa, like how they get all of these guys. And 2019 was the greatest college football team that we've ever seen. So yeah. Like for me, I think we talk about low floors or a high floor. I think LSU under Kelly has a very high floor.
I agree. That's one area where I definitely agree with you. And I do think that I would definitely bet on Kelly getting them to a place where it's 10 wins every year.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that he's capable of getting 15 wins with them. Okay, let me rephrase that. Capable was the wrong word. Likely, I guess, would be a better word. I don't know that he's
Okay.
likely to win a national title at LSU. I would expect them because okay, and part of the reason is yes, I'm the biased Notre Dame fan here. I I'll give you whatever you want if you can name the last time that he beat a team with superior talent.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I think okay, and we're gonna get into this. Could get a little bit emotional here, but so Notre Dame we also disagreed on. You had Notre Dame at
Yes,
6. I had Notre Dame at 10. Notre
yes,
Dame averages out at 8 for us. They come in
yep.
at 8,
Tied
one
with
step
USC, by the way.
tied with USC,
They're
but
rival.
one step below LSU.
Hmm.
Kelly left Notre Dame for LSU.
Yep.
Okay, and this will get this will show us like this could show some true colors here, but is that the correct move? For me, that was the correct move for Kelly to go get a better program. And I called LSU a better program, and I apologize for that, but only partially because it's actually true in my opinion. You had Notre Dame at 6, LSU at 10. You believe that Notre Dame is a better program.
I think I would rank them higher in a power ranking right now, which is what this is. I don't think they have a higher ceiling than LSU. And
Okay.
like you mentioned, the last two coaches at LSU won titles. Whatever. I don't want to get too caught up on the ceiling. I do think it's probably pretty. I think Notre Dame's ceiling might be higher than most people realize. 30 years ago, they had the best roster in the country. And,
Yeah.
that's fairly long ago, but not ridiculously long ago. Regardless of what I'm saying here, yeah, LSU probably has a higher ceiling than Notre Dame right now. But if you compare just the consistency of the last 5 years, yeah, LSU has that title. That's gone. Like, if I compare the rosters right now, I'd take Notre Dame's. So I do think that, oh, yes, I would take Notre
So
Dame's roster right now over LSU's.
neutral site next year, you would pick Notre Dame over LSU.
Yes, I would.
Okay.
3 years from now, maybe not. 3, 4 years from now, there's a chance that LSU is better, but I'm also kind of betting on Marcus Freeman and the recruiting to step up for Notre Dame here.
Okay.
If you look at the recruiting just under Marcus Freeman so far compared to what it was under Kelly, it's night and day. And by the way, the coach before Brian Kelly, Charlie Weiss, not a great developer of talent, not a great hirer of coaches, assistant coaches. That's not a very proper word,
Yeah. No, I
hirer.
like it.
Not
I
very
like
good at
it.
hiring coaches, not very good at developing talent,
Yeah.
but the man could recruit. Charlie Weiss signed 2 top 5 classes at Notre Dame. Kelly signed a number 6 class and then a bunch of 10 to 16 classes.
Sure.
And that was with more success to show for than Weiss ever had. So, I
But
do think that Marcus Freeman will get Notre Dame to that top 6 range recruiting wise.
I would point out the world is different now when Kelly as was at Notre Dame than when Weiss was at Notre Dame. Like it's a whole different world, especially in recruiting. You like that was the pre Nick Saban days. Like that was before that thing got rolling. That was before Clemson was good. That was before Kirby Smart was there mopping up the 5 stars. Before Jimbo was grabbing a, you know what I mean? Like it was just
Yeah.
easier then, and yeah, like I think it's incredibly difficult to recruit in the top 10 even
Yeah,
because
it is.
we talk about like who are the good classes and like well they need a top 10 class well this team also needs a top 10 class well, there can only be 10 only can be
Yeah.
10 in the top 10 like there's going to be good programs that are left out and for me I would say that Notre Dame would probably be more likely to drop out of the top 10
So you
like
think their recruiting will get worse under Marcus Freeman than it was under Kelly?
maybe slightly I think and I'm not saying that I don't think Notre Dame has gotten worse at it I think like we're seeing A&M just pour money in like they're literally just throwing money at the problem you've seen like Riley going to USC he's going to recruit well like we'll get
Yep.
more into Riley in a bit but he's going to recruit well Harbaugh is just went to the playoff and I think for him like I think that will help his recruiting a bit yeah, Ryan Day also recruits well. Like I think it's really difficult now. I think some of the other programs have invested more in their football program than Notre Dame has. And I could be wrong. Like this is all up for debate, but like for me, I think the other programs are more invested in the recruiting, the NIL stuff, because that's what you have to do now. Like you have to do that now to get players, and I think that's where Notre Dame's Achilles heel will be.
Yeah, I do think that you're right as far as some of like the facilities and whatever. Notre Dame is not probably the top 3 or 4 level, but they are a top 10 level, I would say, with facilities, that type of thing. And there's been some stuff in the works from former Notre Dame players that are now businessmen with the NIL thing. I don't think Notre Dame as a university is quite as willing to dive into that and be a facilitator in that area as some of your A&Ms, if you will. But I do think there are some pretty well-connected alums that are going to make some of that happen. It might not be to the same effect as an A&M, but I do think just because they finally have a head coach that will put in the effort. Like I do think their recruiting will get better under Marcus Freeman. And yeah, maybe he's not a great coach. Maybe it doesn't work out, but I'm betting with a healthier roster, they will continue to beat the teams they're supposed to beat, and he might actually upset a few that they're not supposed to, because that never happened under Kelly. He got them to a place where they beat all the teams that they had a talent advantage over, and they lost all the teams that had a talent advantage over them. That was fairly consistent under Brian Kelly.
So we roll into number 9. Well, actually, we had a tie at 8 between Notre Dame and Notre Dame's rival.
Yes.
USC.
Right.
Okay, I'll let you go first, and then I'm going to go second on USC because I have a hot take.
Okay. I think that there's a chance that I guess if I was only ranking on future outlook and ceiling, like I would probably have USC higher than Notre Dame. I do think they have a higher ceiling than Notre Dame.
Okay.
But as far as just the stability of the program, right now Notre Dame is clearly more stable than USC. They haven't lost to USC since 2016, and they play every year when there's not COVID. I just feel like Notre Dame is in a lot more stable place than USC. So to me, that was the tiebreaker between. Yeah, so maybe USC has a slightly better future outlook, potentially, but I do think Notre Dame's in a lot better place right now.
So I would agree. Okay, now we're going to get into the Lincoln Riley stuff. Lincoln Riley should have never left Oklahoma. I firmly believe that, but here's why he did. I believe that Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma because if he continued on his trajectory that he was on there, he would have been on the hot seat within a matter of a year or two. Wow. I believe that. I think that Lincoln Riley's last 4 teams continuously got worse. I think they each piled on each other. I think they got worse each year. I don't think it was a talent issue. I think they have talent. I mean, obviously, look at the quarterbacks in the NFL, the receivers in the NFL. Like they're even their running backs, tight ends, offensive linemen. They had some good edge rushers as well. Like they are not without talent at all at Oklahoma. You cannot blame that. So I'm putting this problem right on Lincoln Riley. I understand that USC is delighted to have him, and he's bringing energy there. I'm saying that he's overrated. Lincoln Riley is overrated as a coach. I don't know how well it's going to work out at USC. He does have a high ceiling there. I'll grant him that. He does have a very high ceiling because you're at USC, and if you can recruit just like SoCal well, if you can recruit Southern California pretty well, you're going to be a national player. It's just the way it is. So I understand that. I think that he would have gotten fired at Oklahoma had he remained there another year or 2 years. I really think it was going downhill. I think we saw it this year. I think we saw it the previous 3. Each team just continuously got just a little, I don't want to say less physical. There was an it factor there that they didn't have. They didn't have it. And I think that's on coaching a little bit.
By the way, I think I would probably be a little higher on them if he hadn't hired or brought Alex Grinch with him from Oklahoma.
Everyone thinks he's so good, though. Everyone just loves Alex Grinch, and their defense still isn't very good.
Yeah, I think if he had made whatever the defensive version of Jeff Lebby is. Like if he'd have made a
Yeah.
better defensive coordinator hire,
Yeah.
maybe even brought in like a Jeremy Pruitt or something,
Yeah,
who
sure.
was very good as a defensive coordinator.
Yep.
Like I think I would feel a little better about USC.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I think he's going to improve the recruiting a lot because it's a lot more. I think that's the main reason. Like it's to me, it's roughly similar to Brian Kelly leaving for LSU. Like the access to talent is just a little higher. It's just a little bit better at a place like USC. There's no other tier one brands on the West Coast to recruit against. Yeah, so I know nothing you said makes me think that USC should be above Notre Dame. So maybe you want to explain why you have them at 8 ahead of Michigan and Notre Dame.
Okay. Okay. This is a tough one for me. I don't view Notre Dame very highly right now. And
Okay.
again, I apologize to the Notre Dame fans out there. I don't think they're very bought in to football right now. I think USC is beginning to get bought into football. I think Michigan is beginning to get bought into football, but I don't think they're as bought in as the teams above them. I don't. No, I don't think Notre Dame's as bought in as LSU is. They're not as bought in as Oklahoma. Definitely not as much as A&M, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama. Why would I put them above? Like, well, yeah, why would I put them in that group when I don't believe that they have the backing and just the support overall from fans, alumni to make the NIL stuff work?
Well, number one, just because they're better right now. They are flat out a better program right now than USC is, than LSU is for sure, and arguably,
Oh,
I
okay.
would. I'm not sure if okay. Personally, if I'm ranking current rosters, like
Okay.
how good is the roster right now?
Yes.
I have Notre Dame ahead of Oklahoma, LSU, USC, and Michigan. That's basic. Like I just really believe that, and I do think it's going to just get better under Marcus Freeman.
How are we supposed to believe it's going to get better when we have we don't know what Marcus Freeman is as a game day coach. We really have no idea.
We don't necessarily, but we know what the recruiting has been like under him so far. Like right now, they have an absolutely ridiculous start to the 2023 class. Like they could add only 3 stars from here on out, and it would probably still rank in the top 8 of the country. Like that's how good the start has been.
Well, okay, but like ask Texas how that works out. Like you can't
Sure.
just stack a whole bunch of 5 stars there and just expect him to be good. It's like you remember like the criticism of Kirby Smart, like he can't develop. Like remember he just gets all these 5 stars and they just win games for him. Like that was always kind of
Sure.
like the critique against him. Then like we found out like that's okay, that's not actually not true. Like it's you do have to get 5 stars, but you have to like freaking coach them too. Like there's a really
Yeah.
big element of just coaching, motivation, the training. Um, yeah, what are your off seasons like? Like how
Yeah.
are they structured? Like how's your conditioning? So like all these things matter, and I think for each coach it's different. And if Notre Dame comes out and has a really good year this year, and especially in like late game situations, they do well, they excel in like tight late game situations, then I would be way more comfortable with them going forward. Right now, they just have a rookie head coach
Sure.
I mean, he's really young. Like he's an up and comer, I
Yeah.
understand. But I haven't seen it yet. Therefore, I'm hesitant on Notre Dame. That's the hesitance. I guess I would trust USC a little bit more this year. Long term, you could convince me that Notre Dame could catch up and get there if that works out. But I think they are more likely to be lower in 5 years than USC is. I think in 5 years from now, I think USC will be a better program than Notre Dame.
Okay. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but I think Notre Dame's in a better place right now. And as far as the Marcus Freeman thing, first time coach, of course that's a concern. I guess part of
Mm-hmm.
the reason I don't have as much concern with it and because sure, it is a gamble putting a program with a first time head coach at number 6. Like that's a gamble. But part of the reason
Sure.
why I'm willing to take that gamble is everyone that comes in contact with this guy raves about him. Players, assistant coaches, and the media. Like every alumni that have nothing to do with him, that only played under other coaches.
Right.
It's consensus across the board. Everyone likes this guy. You often have talked about how the recruits know first.
Yeah.
Right now, the recruits are signing up for Marcus Freeman. They're buying what he's selling.
Okay. I'm just saying I would rather have Brent Venables. If I was going to hire a defensive coordinator, I'd take Venables over Marcus Freeman. No
Sure.
disrespect. Freeman's a kid. Like Freeman's
Sure.
really, really young. And that doesn't mean that, I think like he'll get there. I think he has a lot to learn yet.
Yeah, that's fair. Brent Venables has done it longer. Made a great offensive coordinator hire. And it's a little easier, I would say, probably at a place like Oklahoma. It's just a little easier. So yeah, I had Oklahoma one slot behind Notre Dame just because I feel like, I don't know, I just have that much faith in Marcus Freeman, I guess.
Okay. And maybe a slight homer pick.
He feels more head coachy to me than Brent Venables does. And that's purely feel. Okay. That's a purely feel thing. It's just Brent Venables to me. He screams defensive coordinator at you. And that might work out wonderfully as a head coach. It might. But Marcus Freeman just has that
head coachy feel. A head coachy feel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. And
all right,
that's completely subjective. I am well aware of that.
Okay.
He just feels like the head man to me.
Okay. He has a head coachy feel. We need to put that. We need to pin that to our YouTube. We believe that Marcus Freeman has the head coachy feel.
I don't know if that would make a great post
title?
On Instagram or anything. Yeah. But anyway, moving on here. We should move on. Yeah. We had Michigan. We both had them at 9, and the averages came out where they were at 10. To me, this feels about right. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we both had them after USC, I would assume mostly based on just what we think that USC could become over the next 5 years.
Yes. Michigan was hard. Michigan was difficult. Okay, so you look at who's right below Michigan. We have Michigan at 10. We have Florida at 11. Texas 12. Mm-hmm. Michigan went to the playoff this year and won the Big Ten, whereas Florida, Texas, these other programs were not even really on that level. We
actually have Florida and Texas tied, by the way. Just thought I should point that out there.
Okay. We gave Michigan the tiebreak. Oh, sorry. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So Michigan. Oh, yes. Michigan. Oh, Michigan. This is me believing in Jim Harbaugh again, I think. And we agreed, by the way, we both had them ranked the same. So there was agreement for us on Michigan. And there should be I think they have put in a higher floor for themselves. This year raises their floor a bit. I think they could be a sneaky, they're going to be not the favorite to win the Big Ten, but they would be a really good bet. If you want to bet on someone and get some really good value, early on, betting Michigan to win the Big Ten this year is a good value bet right now.
Don't you think we would have both had them at 5 or 6 if they had just signed maybe the number 4 recruiting class in the country?
No question.
Because, we just saw them make the playoff.
Yep.
And they played physical, tough football. It makes you think that, their floor is high.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at these top 10 teams, I think it's also fair to say their ceiling is the lowest of these top 10.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I do think Michigan mauling Ohio State, that somehow that really mattered to me. That really affected me. It made me believe that Ohio State not only can't stop them this year, they might not be able to stop them next year.
Sure. There's that chance.
Yes, I think Michigan is a matchup nightmare for Ohio State, who wants to spread the ball out and go fast. Whereas, Michigan, and we saw Oregon do it too. We're just going to run the ball and take up a lot of clock and keep you off balance. And I think for Michigan, so much of their season hinges on whether or not they beat Ohio State, and almost they can't have a successful year if they lose to Ohio State. So if they do beat them. It's so tough. They're a difficult program to really get a good gauge on, but they do feel they are 10, they're a top 10 team, but they are 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, they're definitely in that the lower section of that second tier.
And by the way, just talking about them having maybe the lowest ceiling of these top 10 teams, they don't have an outright title since the 1940s.
Okay.
They had one shared title in 1997. Like to me, this is not like some wild thing to say that Michigan maybe has only the ninth highest ceiling in the country. Like that's kind of historically what they've been. They've had a high floor most of that time, but and they're I think going forward, Harbaugh might have them at a consistent 9 to 10 win spot, which is really good. I just like if I'm looking at these top 10 programs, like I don't know, they're probably about the last one I would pick to win a title anytime soon.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, no disagreement there. I guess that's our top 10. Moving on, you mentioned our next two are Florida and Texas. We both had Texas at 12.
Yeah.
And let's see. I think I had Florida one slot ahead of them, and you had Florida one slot behind them.
Correct.
Those are our next two teams. Was this one a tough one for you, or was it fairly easy for you to put Texas ahead of Florida? How do you, because these, to me, for the last decade, these kind of feel like the same program almost.
They are. Yeah, I think they are. So Florida and Texas, like they're like USC, but like without like a really splashy hire at head coach to get the recruits all, excited and bring in big transfers. Florida, all it would take for them is to have like a couple of big 5-star like guys transfer in.
Yeah.
Imagine Florida, like if they get Caleb Williams and like a really big name receiver. Suddenly it's like, whoa, like okay, like they could win the East, they could go play for the SEC championship, like they could do all that. Florida has talent, Florida has players. Texas is the same way. Texas has guys.
Yeah.
It's so unrealized. Like we can get to Okay, Texas's problem, I think, is boosters. Like, there's no reason why Texas should not be good. You can rack your brain and try to figure out how Texas isn't good, and it makes no sense. Good coaches. Tom Herman was a good coach. Charlie Strong was a pretty good coach. Mac is a good coach. Like, they have good coaches there. They have talent there. How is this not working? Like, not only is it not working, like, it's very much not working. Like, it's just dysfunction. It feels dysfunctional at Texas. So, like, I have them at 12, but, like, Texas is probably more likely to win a title than some of the teams that we have in the top 10. Like Texas, if they get their stuff together, could absolutely be a player. They're not now. Like I think Sarkisian's really good. I like what he's doing there. Can he get figured out whatever the problem is with their boosters and stuff? Maybe. Like, I don't know. It remains to be seen. And like that's kind of the thing with Texas right now. That's kind of where you have to leave them, because even though you want to put them higher, you can't, because like the results just give you no reason to. Like you can't justify it. And Florida for me is kind of the same way. Like they're almost identical programs, because if Florida could get their stuff figured out, like they could be a player, and they should be a player. Like I think college football is better when Florida and Texas are good. Like I grew up with that. Like I grew up with them being good programs, and they're not. And yeah, like they can be again, and they probably will be. It's just a matter of time, and if these coaches are the right fits.
Sure. I think I probably just had Florida over Texas, because I think I trust Napier a little more than Sark when it comes to not screwing it up. like I think Florida's floor is going to be higher. Texas might have a higher ceiling. Like I don't know. That's debatable, because I think both of these programs have very high ceilings.
Agreed.
But I don't know. There's a lot of all of the chatter you hear about what Billy Napier has done since being hired by Florida has been positive. Like, he got LSU's DB's coach, or cornerbacks coach, maybe. I don't know, whatever. The guy that has been developing all these LSU cornerbacks over the last decade or whatever. Florida got him. I can't remember his name right now.
Khalif Raymond.
Okay. I guess I just like Napier.
Okay.
I don't know that it's going to be some kind of grand slam. They're going to win 3 titles in the next 15 years. I don't know about that, but I don't like. I think maybe Florida is a slightly better bet to avoid any kind of 7-5 season going forward.
Florida will be lucky to go 7-5 this year. I don't know if you've seen their schedule or not. Florida has a loaded schedule. They have to play Utah week 1. They're at the Swamp, and that's probably an L. and then they follow it up with Kentucky. So like they could easily be 0-2 to start out the year, because Florida has some rebuilding to do.
Well, okay, let me ask you this then. Who do you think is more likely to go 7-5 in 2024?
Florida.
Okay,
Florida.
interesting.
Yeah, probably Florida than Texas. I had Texas one slot ahead of them. You had it reversed. So like we're kind of in about the same boat. I do kind of attach these programs together, and I think I give Texas like an advantage strictly because they don't play in the same conference as Alabama and Georgia.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. They're about to though.
Yeah, I know. It's a short term thing.
Oh man, so yeah, I guess we don't have a whole lot of difference there. It's maybe just who you trust a little bit more. I think I probably just trust Napier just a little bit more.
Okay.
All right, next we have Miami. You had them at 11, actually, ahead of Florida and Texas. I had them a little behind at 15.
Yes.
Averages out to 13, which is where they are. And I don't know. Like, I don't have an issue with you ranking them 11, and I don't hate my 15 pick either. Talk a little bit about what you thought of with Miami, I guess.
I'm on the hype with Miami. I'm riding the hype there. I think the coaches that have been brought in there, the assistant coaches, I've been a fan of. I have been a fan of what they brought in, and that's what I'm betting on. I'm betting that they can get some of these, like the massive 5-star, like just a talent-rich program that is Miami in general. I think they're going to keep some of these guys there. I think it's an attractive place. And if you can create an energy in Miami, I think that thing starts to snowball. I think they're my favorite Florida program. Like going forward, if one of the Florida programs was going to win a title in the next 5 years, Miami's my pick. And like I feel pretty confident in that. Probably just because they play in the ACC. Like it's not going to be extremely difficult for them. Like, yeah, again, they don't have to go against really tough programs. And if they can keep some of these recruits there, they could be in the playoff quickly. I absolutely believe that.
Yeah, I think I trust Florida slightly more than Miami based on the floor, I would say. Like, I know we just saw Florida have a pretty bad year.
Yeah.
But even in a bad year, they almost beat Alabama, and like everything had to go wrong. Like everything went wrong. They gave up playing basically to have the ending that they had. What 5-7? No, they went 6-6 because they beat Florida State in their last game. Like Miami, I feel like is just like I don't trust them to not screw it up, I guess. And Mario Cristobal, I think, was a really good hire for them. Like I do think the recruiting will improve. I like your ACC point. Like I do think that's a point in their favor. Like just you have Clemson and then a whole bunch of other question marks. But I don't think I trust Cristobal quite as much as maybe some people do. Okay. And I'm not knocking him necessarily. I just don't know that. I don't know. Like I felt like his offenses were a bit shakier than they should have been at Oregon. And whatever, maybe that's figured. I mean, he hired Josh Gaddis from Michigan. That could work out really well. It really could. I don't know. There's Michigan fans that will tell you that Gaddis was not that great. The guys that really mattered were like the quarterback coach and whatever. Like maybe that's sour grapes, probably is. And Oregon fans will kind of tell you the same thing about Cristobal. His offense really not that good. Sour grapes. Take it all with a grain of salt. Maybe there's a grain of truth to it too. I don't know. I guess I just don't trust Miami quite as much, just because I don't think the floor is quite as high as Florida's.
Fair enough.
All right, next we have Oregon. We both had them at 14, which is where they come out in our list. Dan Lanning is the new hire there.
Yes.
Did you struggle with where to put them at all, or did this to me this just kind of felt like the place to put Oregon?
It felt right. I think when you're lining up all these teams, like Oregon has to go in the top 15 somewhere. Like, do I really believe they're out of the top 15? No. Okay. Like I guess I got to put them in there somewhere because they always are. So Oregon, I don't think it should be forgot. They went to Ohio State and won this past year. They were a playoff contender until 2 weeks left in the regular season. They were 9-1, I believe, and then lost their last two, or were they maybe even 10-1? So like, yeah, they had a tough stretch to end the year, but they were a playoff contender late, and that matters for me. So like, that's probably why I still had them in the top 15. I think it will be a little bit of a transition with Dan Lanning going there. I think, yeah, not confident that they'll just immediately vault into the top 10. So yeah, 14 felt about the right place, and that's kind of where I guess we were both on the same page there.
Yeah, it felt right to me. I think some of the stuff I was looking at, and just like the fact that I feel like I know less about Lanning than I do some of the other hires, even like Venables and Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
He might turn out to be just as good or better. I don't know. But Oregon, I guess if I compare it to Oklahoma and Notre Dame, like the name brand is not quite as powerful. And so I think maybe the floor is a bit lower. But
Agreed. Yeah.
So that's our 14 team. We now have two teams tied next for 15th. And it's kind of funny. We both had Arkansas at 16.
Yeah.
And then the other team, this was our only disagreement in the top 16 as far as a team being in or out. I had Penn State at 13. You had them at 19. That averages out to 16, so which puts them in a tie with Arkansas. And we have a pretty big drop off after this if you're looking at the averages of our rankings. So this is kind of a clear top 16 per the averages. Clearly, you have Penn State lower. Why did you have Penn State down at 19?
Okay, I have a problem with you ranking Arkansas below Penn State. I have a big issue with that. Like, how can you just, okay, I'm okay with putting Arkansas at 16. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. They're an up and coming team. I don't view them as a top 15 team yet, even though like the jury's still out. Like I'm coming on fast. And if you gave me 2 more weeks to think about this, I could easily justify putting Arkansas in my top 10. We're pumping the brakes a little bit because my Arkansas fandom is growing. But there is no way that you can put Penn State ahead of Arkansas when, like, we just saw it. Like, they played.
Yeah,
they played. It was a 2-score game, and it wasn't even that close. Like, so what are we, like, I'm not sure what we're betting on. Like, we're betting that Penn State is more physical, better coach. Like I didn't see that. Like, do we have better skill players? Like, they had a good recruiting class. Like that has to be the only thing that they've done better. But like, Arkansas has developed their players so well in the last 2 years. I think it's been incredible. Yeah. Arkansas would be the favorite for me if they played again next year. I think they'd beat them by 2 scores again. So for me, it was very, very tough to put. I don't understand how you can justify Penn State ahead of Arkansas. Like we said, we had Penn State. Penn State was at 15, Arkansas 16. That was just a tiebreaker. Like they were tied. We had on the averages they were tied. But yeah, for me, Arkansas needs to get the check mark ahead of Penn State.
So you also, I'll turn it back on you. You ranked Ohio State ahead of Michigan and Notre Dame ahead of Oklahoma State.
Okay, that's not the same thing. That is not the same thing, because no, hang on. We're talking about where the programs are. I could like, Penn State's program has been in a decline. There's like that much I don't believe is any question. Whereas Arkansas is coming on. Like, we're projecting here. We're trying to project forward, out years. And like, Arkansas has come like literally from the dead. Like, they are back from the dead and like have vaulted themselves into the top 20. And like, looking at Arkansas 3 years ago is the only reason that I don't have Arkansas higher than that even. Like, because they're competing with these teams above them. They are absolutely competing with these teams above them. And like, is Arkansas in a better place than Florida is right now? Like, I could argue yes. The only reason that I had them that low is just because they were so bad just 3 short years ago. I mean, abysmal, like terrible, like awful. So like, that's the only thing that's holding me back for them. And I understand, if you want to bring in the head-to-head stuff, but Penn State's been on a decline for me. And there's Penn State fans that weren't happy that Franklin got re-upped in this off season, whereas you will not find an Arkansas fan that isn't just ecstatic about where their program's headed under Pittman.
I agree. So here's kind of my thinking on it. To me, this comes down to more than just okay, what will they be in 2022? I know it's maybe a bit overrated in some circumstances, but the Penn State logo means more than the Arkansas logo. It just does.
Oh,
And okay,
Penn State
I'm not
doesn't even
done.
have a logo. They don't
I'm
even
not.
have a logo.
I'm
They have
not
plain
done.
helmets.
I'm not done.
Okay.
So if we go back right before COVID and we compare Penn State and Michigan just as programs, we're both putting Penn State ahead of Michigan. Now Penn State had a rough couple of years here, but I think
Okay.
they're scraping their floor. Like this is their floor.
Oh.
I think Arkansas might have one more step to take, but they're getting close to their ceiling. And if I'm betting on
Oh.
a if I'm betting on a 5-year plan here, Penn State is going to recruit better than Arkansas. They just signed the number 6 class in the country. They're going to have a more talented roster than Arkansas. Maybe Franklin leaves in a year. Like, you don't tell me. Penn State could hire away Sam Pittman, theoretically. He might say no just because he kind of bleeds Arkansas, it feels like he kind of has
He's
that
not
in his
leaving.
veins.
Yeah.
If his
He ain't
name was
leaving.
Frank Jones, he would leave for Penn State, is, I guess, kind of the point. Like, it's just, like,
Oh.
and it's close, but I think Penn State, I mean, okay, if we're going to have Texas and Miami and Oregon up here in the top 15, based realistically, but that's based mostly on their brand and their money and their recruiting. Penn State is in that same tier. They have the brand and the money and the recruiting. They don't have tier 1 or probably even tier 2 recruiting and money, but they're close. They're in that historic program level. They have a national title. Arkansas does not have anything like that.
I guess maybe where I'm at is if you rewind this, just a couple of years ago, you see these programs are at drastically different places, just
Sure.
drastically different places. Penn State was playing in Rose Bowls, and Arkansas hadn't won a conference game in what, it was like 3 years or something. They hadn't won one, and Arkansas, Arkansas beat up on Penn State,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, I just think it's just such an indication of where these teams are headed and like where these coaching staffs are at. And I don't really believe in James Franklin that much. I don't believe in him that much. And would they be better if they got rid of him? Maybe, depending on who they got. They're not. Yeah, Sam Pittman is never leaving Arkansas. Like, he is Arkansas until he dies. But so they'll have to go somewhere else for him. But there's no question right now who has the better coaching staff, if that
Sure.
makes sense.
I agree with you.
But the only way that you could convince me that, like, the recruiting thing is legitimate. Penn State had a really good class this year, but I believe that Pittman at Arkansas is going to have good classes in years to come.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and I would agree with Arkansas having a better coach and coaching staff, but I don't know that they have any other advantages over Penn State right now because
Better quarterback.
Okay, well, yeah, if you look at individual positions, you can find, but if you compare the roster, Penn State has a better roster. They recruit better. They have more money, more support. I don't know. They also don't play in the SEC West.
that does work out well. That's crazy how, like, yeah, like, we're a pretty good team. Like, what was your record? Well, we 8-4. Like, oh, you're no good. Well, like, who'd you lose to? Well, it was Alabama and LSU, and Georgia was the crossover game. And then, I mean, that's actually what happened to them. They played
Right.
Alabama, LSU, A&M. Georgia was their crossover game for Arkansas this year. Like, yeah, they got hammered. They got hammered by Georgia, but like they actually beat, they beat LSU and A&M. But like, just being in the SEC West is just a meat grinder, and like that's a valid point. But Penn State has a fairly tough region. Like, they probably have the second toughest region because they have to play Michigan, they have to play Michigan State, and they have to play Ohio State. Now, we left Michigan State. Michigan State did not make our top 20. And
I had them at 21, but anyway, I guess part of it, mostly for me, it just comes down to, I think Penn State is scraping their floor right now, and I think that they're going to get better. So, whatever. I don't have a huge issue with Arkansas over Penn State, but it's a fun debate. Okay.
I have a big issue with it. We need a bet. We need like a show bet. Who's
Okay.
winning more games next year? Arkansas. I'm taking Arkansas.
Oh,
You
next
can't- you
year
can't
I'll
convince
go
me otherwise.
Arkansas. I agree with you.
Yes.
If you go the next 5 years,
What about the year after that?
It's a bit iffy. 2023. Ooh. So much of it comes down to, will the Penn State quarterback work out, the freshman this year? The 5-star
They never do. They never do.
Yeah.
Why do we think that this one will? Anyone remember Christian Hackenberg and how he was supposed to save the world? Like, I'm old enough to remember that. Where is he now?
He was also dealing with a much less talented roster due to everything that happened there.
Okay.
Anyway, we got to move on here. So we have a tie here at 17, and this is kind of fun because we both ranked these two teams 17 and 23. We just had them switched. So I had Ole Miss at 17 and Wisconsin at 23. You had Wisconsin at 17 and Ole Miss at 23. Kind of a big variance here, a little bit. I mean, it's all relative because from 17 to 40, it's pull names out of a hat, basically. What makes you have Wisconsin at 17, Ole Miss down at 23? Yeah. What's your thinking?
Wisconsin 17 because Wisconsin is just so ridiculously reliable, so ridiculously reliable. We went over the SP Plus stuff last week. They had Wisconsin in the top 10, which is too high. Granted, I understand it's too high, but you can't convince me that Wisconsin's not a top 20 team in the country. You cannot convince me. I think they will be. I think they will be for a while. I'm not saying I don't think they have a very high ceiling, but I think their floor is just ridiculously high. And I trust them more. I think that's why, just because we've seen it for so many years. The reason I had Ole Miss at 23 is strictly because they play in the SEC West. That is it. Sure. That is the reason, nothing more. I think I have Arkansas ahead of them. I have LSU ahead of them. I have A&M ahead of them. I have Alabama ahead of them. If they lose to those four teams, they're 8-4, and they're probably about 23 to 25 range in the AP poll. That's kind of where I see Ole Miss at. I understand they went to the Sugar Bowl. I get that. I don't think they're going to be able to beat these other teams in the West long term. And that's why I had them a little lower at 23. Still a really good team. Still really like Lane Kiffin. Him losing Jeff Lebby, I think that hurts. I think that matters. That does. And now you got to have a new quarterback. We'll see. How's that going to work? I think for me, that was the difference maker. And that's why I had such a big gap between the two.
You heard it here first. Graham Mertz is Ashton's favorite quarterback.
That's not true. That is.
I'm just kidding.
No. Graham Mertz alone kept me from ranking them so much higher. Graham Mertz. Okay, let's not. Don't get me upset about it. He's so bad. How is he a starter? Yeah. Oh, okay. Anyway, darn you, Vince. Don't get me riled up about it.
I actually mostly agree with your Wisconsin. Thing. I do think they have a high floor, and they're a very consistently good team. Mm-hmm. I had them at 23. I just feel like consistently good to me feels like a top 25 team, not necessarily a top 20 program.
Yeah.
Again, this, we're to the point of the rankings where it's slight preferences. I also last year they had the number 21 ranked talented roster in the country, which feels about right. And then they signed the number 42 class, I believe. It was in the 40s. Mm-hmm. It was a good year for offensive line recruits in the state of Wisconsin. There were 3 that were fairly highly ranked, and Ohio State and Notre Dame both got one of them. And that shouldn't happen, I feel like, because Wisconsin has about as good a stake to O-line U as anybody, especially when you compare the recruiting rankings to how they actually turn out. Wisconsin is one of those schools that churns out offensive linemen. They lost 2 of the best recruits in the state, offensive linemen. Those need to keep those in state.
Valid.
Paul Chryst, I think, is a perfectly decent coach. I don't know. If you're in my top 20, I want to see a little higher ceiling, I guess.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Is that about as okay? Ole Miss. I guess I just like their ceiling a little higher. You mentioned it. We just saw them go to the Sugar Bowl. We actually both have them behind Arkansas, despite them having a better season last year than Arkansas. And I think Ole Miss has probably a higher ceiling than Arkansas. They had some years. They've never won a title, but they've come close in the last 75 years or whatever. Like they've had some fairly high level seasons. I would say their average season, is probably closer to Arkansas. Like it's not significant. Like they're both in the lower half of the SEC if you're looking at just their average season. But they're in a good place right now. I just trust their offense to be good. I think Jackson Dart will turn out to be a very good quarterback in that system.
Okay.
Is that about as many thoughts as we can possibly say when we're arguing Ole Miss and Wisconsin? You got anything else?
Yeah. No, I'm good.
All right, so that's our top 18 programs. Number 19, this was an interesting one here. You had Cincinnati, we have Cincinnati at 19. You had them at 15. I had them at 26.
Yep.
Obviously, they were a playoff team this last year, and they have a really good coach. And they're about to be a Power 5 program if you still count the new Big 12 as a Power 5 school. Yep. Talk this one out a little bit. Like, what made you put them at 15?
Well, I mean, you actually just said it. They were a playoff team, and they have a really good coach. That's still there. Like, they're a playoff team that returns their coach, and we have them ranked at 19. And like for me, that feels a little low.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit low. Cincinnati deserved to go to the playoff last year. That wasn't fluky. Absolutely. That wasn't just a bad year. I think Cincinnati played Alabama as close as anyone else in the country would have played them outside of Georgia. So. Yeah, I think I understand they lost a lot, and that was a really special team for them. Mm-hmm. I think Cincinnati have their physicality gives them a very high floor. I think this year we saw that they also have a bit of a ceiling that can go with that too, a nice high ceiling. So, yeah, I think the next couple of years, Cincinnati is going to win a lot of games. They're going to win a lot of games. Even when they go into the Power 5, not concerned about it. They're still going to win a lot of games. They're not going to win maybe as many, but it's still going to be a very impressive number. For me, that's why they made my top 20.
Sure, that's fair. I like this team, or this program, I should say. I'm not sure if I like this team in 2022, just because of what all they lost. And we know Luke Fickell's a really good coach. I don't know. Like, to me, it just kind of comes down to the group of 5 thing, and whatever. You can say whatever you want about that. Maybe I'm overlooking them because of that too much. But money-wise and just, that money to me, I guess, spoke a lot. And I don't think that they can quite compete. Even if you're comparing them to like a Michigan State, like they can't give their coach the kind of money Michigan State just gave Mel Tucker. And maybe that works out for Michigan State or not. I'm just saying, if you compare to most Power 5 schools, they're playing with a little bit less of a deck. And they do very well with that deck. But we just saw their ceiling, I think, and I would bet on them dropping back a little bit. TCU was, I guess, a similar program 10 years ago. They were always in that top 10. Gary Patterson, very good coach. When Notre Dame hired Brian Kelly, I kind of secretly wanted Gary Patterson or Chris Peterson. Boise State and TCU's coaches had been done very well. They had both been very good. Those are G5 schools. And Notre Dame went with the Cincinnati coach, who at the time was in the Big East, which was kind of a Power 5 school. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, it mostly worked out. To me, there's some parallels between TCU back then and Cincinnati now. And, very well-respected coaches, dominant programs in the group of 5. And TCU has been a pretty good program in the Big 12. But neither one of us has them in our top 20. Like, it's a little different when you're playing that Power 5 school every single week. And so, like, I guess I just don't trust Cincinnati quite as much going forward, just because they lost so much, and it's a little harder at a place like Cincinnati.
No, I agree. I do think that like a playoff appearance gives him so much credibility that he will be able to get slightly better players than he was getting just 2 years ago. And I think he can use that to kind of parlay some success in the Big 12 or whatever they're going to call it after the shakeup.
Yeah, I don't have any huge disagreement with any of that. All right, our last team in the top 20 here is Utah. I had them at 24. You had them at 18. Which is a difference of 6, but it also kind of feels like not much of a difference. Like when you're actually picking these teams and putting them in order. Yeah. What do you think about Utah?
Okay, so like they went to the Rose Bowl, right? Should have won, right? We talked about that. They're they're good. Like they're just good. Like
Yeah.
they're kind of Wisconsin-ish a little bit
Yes,
in
very
kind of their
much.
in their approach where it's physical. They probably are a little bit more physical than Wisconsin. I don't think they quite have the skill players that Wisconsin has, even though Wisconsin doesn't have great skill players. I don't, yeah, like overall, I think year in, year out, Wisconsin's going to have slightly, oh, slightly, very, very, very slightly better skill players than
Hmm.
Utah will, but I think they're very, very close. I actually had them ranked only one slot apart. I had Wisconsin 17, Utah 18. I view them as almost identical programs
Hmm.
with extremely stable coaches. And I think it gives them a very high floor. And I think that's kind of what I was looking towards as I rounded out my top 20.
Your process was almost exactly the same as mine then. I also had them one spot behind Wisconsin. I think I trust the head coach a little more, but usually their recruiting is a little bit worse than Wisconsin's. Um, and here, okay, so I just talked about TCU 10 years ago. Utah was also a group of five team 10 years ago,
Yep.
and they've become a very high floor, stable program in the Pac 12. Um, and yeah, we have Cincinnati one spot ahead of them. 10 years from now, we might have Cincinnati the same spot. I don't know. Maybe they're in the top 15 10 years from now. Maybe they're not. To me, it feels like Cincinnati and Utah 10 years from now might be the exact same program.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's fair. That's fair enough. I do just want to give myself a little bit of a shout out. I picked Utah to win the South, I believe, the Pac-12 South last year, and
Yes.
got criticized, heavily criticized for it. And yeah, just throwing it out there, they actually went ahead and won the whole Pac-12. So yeah,
Yes,
went to
you
the Rose
did.
Bowl. No big deal.
I can vouch for that.
Shout out to
Good.
the haters.
Yeah. I think I was relatively high on them last year, maybe not quite as high as you were. But
Okay. All right. All right.
generally our podcast was on them a little bit. Like that was
We
maybe
were.
not
Yeah.
one of the darlings we talked about all year. And it probably we probably let them fall off the radar once they lost to BYU.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
they rebounded very nicely.
That's true.
Okay, so yeah, like okay, that's our top 20. Sort of the next five or so teams that didn't quite make the cut. We so teams that we both had in our top 20 that didn't actually make the top 20: Tennessee, Florida State, Baylor, BYU. I think those are the only other four programs we actually had in the top 20. Michigan State, I had at 21. You had Iowa at 21, so those are right in that next group. Oklahoma State was close. BYU, yeah. Any thoughts on any of these programs that just missed?
Um, I think Tennessee would have some high upside.
Yeah.
I I left them off. I know you were higher on Tennessee than I was. I left them off, and honestly, I don't really have a great reason other than just I haven't seen it at Tennessee. Like
Sure.
they do have I think they could actually beat some of the other teams that we've talked about, but like they could also lose to Purdue, like which
Yeah.
they did in their bowl game.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so like yeah, like I think they're it's a volatile situation there. I think Heupel is doing a good job at Tennessee, but like yeah, for me they're just not consistent enough to be that top program, and
Hmm.
that's why I left them off. Michigan State was I think we snubbed Michigan State. If anyone got snubbed here, I believe Michigan State got snubbed, and that's on me. I didn't have them high enough. I should have had them higher. Looking back at it now, because like I'm a fan of Mel Tucker, what he's doing there. I think if anyone can feel disrespected, it's the Michigan State fans out there who had an incredible year and didn't even make our top 20.
Yeah. I had them when I originally put this list together. I had them at 20 and Baylor at 21. I ended up switching it. Um, I just trust Dave Aranda a little more than Mel Tucker. I think
Yeah,
Michigan State. I mean, obviously they had a really good season last year.
yeah,
Before the season started, after Mel Tucker's first season, their win total in Vegas was like 4 wins last year.
yeah.
Obviously, they way overperformed that. I do think that some of the advanced stats would say that they weren't quite as good as their record says. So while I like the job Mel Tucker did, and I mostly trust them going forward, I I just don't know. Like I don't know that it's quite as real as we thought it was. Like there's a chance there's a chance it goes really well. There's also a chance that it doesn't work out that well. Like I think there's a bit of variance there. You kind of talked about that with Tennessee. And I think Tennessee has a higher ceiling than Michigan State, for example, and they might have a lower floor. I don't know. But yeah, Tennessee, you could argue, has a higher ceiling than any of the last 6 teams in our top 20. But the floor is, yeah, there's just so much variance there with some of these programs that just missed out.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Michigan State, like they could have gotten lucky a little bit and still won 8 or 9 games.
Yeah.
Like Michigan State went 11-2 in the regular season, and like they beat Michigan. like,
Yeah.
like Michigan State was a good team. It was 11-2, right? No, or 11-1? It was 11-1. They only lost to Ohio State. Pretty sure that's it. Either way, it was. I think they had.
They
They had
lost to
11.
Purdue as well.
They did
that's
lose
the
to
one.
Purdue.
Yeah.
Okay, it was 10-2.
Yeah.
10-2 regular season. But like that's a really that's an incredible job. Like there, I was a huge fan of it. We'll see how they do this year again. Like in the portal, I know like portals was that was kind of like their thing last year. They were kind of like first to the party maybe, and it worked out. It really worked out for them. So hopefully they do it again. I think I like seeing Michigan State good. I like East Lansing. I'm not gonna lie.
Sure.
I enjoy the town. I like where they're at. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm rooting for them.
I'll be rooting for them every time they play Ohio State or Michigan.
Yeah, me too.
Did I say that out loud? Okay. All right, that's our program power rankings. Any other thoughts about this before we move on here? Like, what are the ones that just like infuriate you the most? Like, how could you think of that, Vince?
Penn State, Arkansas. Penn State,
Okay.
Arkansas made me upset today when you sent me like the composite list. I couldn't believe
Okay.
like it just made no sense at all. I think having LSU at 10 is slightly disrespectful considering LSU's actually their last 3 coaches have won titles. Nick Saban was the one that we didn't mention. So Saban, Miles, and Orgeron have won titles there. I think Kelly is at least 2 of the 4. He's not better than Saban, but he's definitely above the other 2. Like I think he can get that done there. So maybe slightly disrespect there. No, only thing that really made me mad was Penn State, Arkansas. Again, mainly because I just dislike Penn State so much. I don't believe in them at all.
All right.